Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. As artificial intelligence rapidly reshapes industries and societies, we're left with a fundamental question, really, that impacts your future. Who is actually writing the global rulebook for this powerful technology? Are we headed for, a single dominant global standard, or is it something far more complex, more fragmented? Today, we're taking a critical look at how global powers, China in particular, are shaping AI governance. We'll be scrutinizing an article from The Economist and its supporting research, and maybe challenging some of its core assumptions about this idea of a Beijing effect, trying to move beyond the simple stories to uncover what's really going on.
Right. And to understand this potential Beijing effect, it's useful to think back a bit. Remember the California effect, where California's strict car emission standards basically set the bar globally. Or more recently, the Brussels effect. The EU's huge consumer market and rules like GDPR for data privacy, it effectively forces global companies to adopt EU standards just to play in that market.
Makes sense.
So the question now is, will China manage something similar with its AI governance model? Will it have that kind of global sway? Or is the picture maybe much more mixed than one single effect suggests?
Okay, let's really get into that. The Economist piece we're looking at, it sort of sets the stage by framing China's AI model as, values-free and purely results-based. Before we pick apart that values-free label, what does the article get right? What are the accurate points about China's advancements and how they're approaching this?
Well, what's genuinely fascinating is just how early and how pragmatically China started building its AI regulations. They really focused on implementation, on actually getting things working, not just writing abstract policies. Since 2021, we've seen them roll out specific rules for things like recommendation algorithms.
Like our social media feeds.
Exactly. And for deep synthesis, that includes deep fakes, AI-generated media, and also generative AI, the tech behind tools like ChatGPT. And crucially, these aren't just suggestions. They involve actual, concrete requirements, like filings, registrations. There are security assessment triggers tied directly to real-world risks. For instance, if an AI service might have public opinion attributes.
Meaning it could sway public thought.
Precisely. If it could significantly influence public discourse, then its compliance becomes absolutely vital. We've seen this documented quite well, showing a level of operational detail that honestly was ahead of many Western frameworks at the time.
So it's not just the rulebook itself. Is China's growing influence also tied to just, sheer technological power and innovation?
Oh, absolutely. That's a key part of the puzzle. We saw this really dramatically with what people call the DeepSeek moment back in January 2025. Imagine this.
Yeah.
A really sophisticated, advanced large language model, DeepSeek R1, gets released. Performs incredibly well, maybe on par with models from the big tech giants.
Right.
But it was produced with just a fraction of the computing power, a fraction of the money, compared to its American rivals.
Sure.
It kind of shattered the assumption that you need those astronomical resources for top-tier AI. It showed what you could do with less, really ushering in this era of, let's say, good enough, widely usable AI that's much more accessible, much cheaper, and that technical success. It feeds directly into that results-based framing The Economist used. It shows they can deliver.
So China isn't just innovating and regulating at home. They're actively trying to export this model.
Yeah.
To push it out globally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Beijing is quite open about wanting to export this policy model. A really clear example is their Global AI Governance Action Plan, which they put forward in July 2025. It's positioned very deliberately as action-oriented and, crucially, as respecting national sovereignty.
The sovereignty angle.
Yes. And that specific pitch, emphasizing sovereignty, practical action, that's language that many governments around the world will definitely recognize and, frankly, find quite appealing.
Okay. We've established China's progress, their regulatory approach, their push outwards. But this is where, for me, The Economist's initial framing gets, tricky. This idea of a values-free model. Does that really stack up when you look closely at their strategy?
This is where it gets really insightful, I think.
Yeah.
Because China's AI rules are far from value neutral. Actually, they're incredibly value explicit. They literally encode goals like carry forward the socialist core value view. They directly link the oversight of AI to content control and managing social order risks.
So not an absence of values, but a very clear statement of which value.
Exactly. It's clarity on values, not their absence. Experts have pointed this out quite clearly. Now, it's important to say it's not just a simple censorship machine either. These same rule sets often include things like pro-competition elements, user choice aspects, like curbing algorithmic price discrimination. But it's value stated, so calling it values-free is just, it's an oversimplification. It misses the fundamental ideological framework that's guiding this innovation.
That's a really important distinction. Value explicit, not values free. But I imagine for many listeners, especially in the West, the immediate thought is still that these socialist core values, prioritizing stability and the collective, fundamentally clash with individual liberties, no matter what pro-competition bits are tacked on. How do you square that perception with the idea that this model could actually be attractive globally?
That's a core tension, absolutely. And it points to something deeper about how China manages this. We shouldn't mistake their pragmatism for being hands-off or laissez-faire. There's research, like Angela Zhang's work, showing how China can have really strict information controls, but at the same time be surprisingly flexible when enforcing rules on things like privacy or copyright if it helps accelerate a key industry.
So bend the rules to boost tech.
In a way, yes. It's a deliberate strategy. You might see officials sharing government data with private companies to help them build facial recognition systems faster, for example, or judges making rulings explicitly designed to speed up AI development. This isn't just letting things happen. It's a very coordinated industrial policy, aligning tech progress with state goals.
Right.
And that mixed strict controls here, targeted flexibility there, makes it fundamentally different from a light-touch, genuinely values-free approach.
Okay, so if it's value explicit and it's this kind of coordinated, sometimes flexible policy, what does that actually mean for how far China's AI model will reach globally? Are we going to see this widespread, dominant Beijing effect everywhere, or is it going to be more patchy?
I think the evidence points towards selective, definitely not global or all-encompassing. We've already seen pushback. Italy's Data Protection Authority, for example, temporarily blocked DeepSeek. Taiwan barred its use in government, citing security concerns.
Right, I remember reading about that.
Those incidents really highlight how the privacy and security standards embedded in more liberal systems can and do clash with Chinese providers, even if the tech is cheap or performs well. It shows these inherent friction points when you have a value-explicit model meeting systems built on different core principles.
So where do you expect this Beijing effect will actually gain traction then? Where will it be strongest?
Well, you'll likely see more uptake in places that really prioritize affordability, or governments looking specifically for strong public order tools, and of course those governments that really respond to that sovereignty-first language China uses in its policy proposals.
Makes sense.
But it's going to be much tougher going, much more resistance in places where things like GDPR-style individual rights and strong data protection norms are dominant. That's where the conflict lies, and that really underlines the selective nature of its global influence.
It definitely sounds like we're not heading towards one single winner-takes-all model for AI governance. It feels much more pluralistic. So who else is shaping this landscape, and how do the big geopolitical players like the U.S. fit into this increasingly complex picture?
Yeah, that's key. China isn't the only one trying to set standards here, not by a long shot. You've got the EU AI Act, which is phasing in right now. Those duties for general-purpose AI, they're already starting to bite as of August 2025. And just like GDPR, it's creating its own Brussels effect.
Because companies just adopt the EU rules everywhere.
Often, yes, to reduce the headache of fragmentation and make sure they have access to that huge, valuable European market. The European Commission's own strategy points to this.
And what about the U.S., especially with, let's say, the current political rhetoric coming out of Washington? How much does that push countries towards, or maybe away from, different models?
That's a really critical factor right now. Let's call it the Trump effect, or maybe more accurately, the current U.S. messaging. You have figures like Vice President J.D. Vance being openly accelerationist, basically saying the AI race isn't going to be won by, quote, hand-wringing about safety.
Right, the build first, ask questions later approach.
Exactly. That kind of build first talk, combined with White House threats of tariffs or restrictions against countries that try to regulate U.S. tech in ways Washington doesn't like, well, it creates a really interesting dynamic. It could actually push some governments away from their traditional U.S. alignment.
Making them look elsewhere.
Forcing them to seriously consider alternatives. Maybe not just Beijing, maybe trying to find a third way. It definitely changes the strategic calculations for many countries.
But does that automatically mean everyone just pivots to China? Or are there still strong forces keeping countries tied to, say, the EU model, or even sticking with U.S. tech despite the rhetoric?
Precisely. It's not an automatic swing. While some might look for alternatives because of the U.S. stance, many countries are still going to follow EU-style rules. They might do it for their own domestic political reasons or simply to keep access to those big premium economies in Europe. And let's be honest, American AI tools and models are still incredibly powerful and, frankly, sticky. Especially for cutting-edge performance, those frontier workloads are absolutely non-negotiable.
The top-tier stuff?
The top-tier stuff, the demand for that highest level of performance often overrides other concerns for specific applications. So no, it's definitely not a simple binary choice between Washington and Beijing. So, stepping back a bit, trying to see the bigger picture. China's offer, it isn't values-free. It's more like a sovereignty-first adoption-forward package. That whole governance, pitch the action plans, the standards work, the fast filings, encouraging local experiments that travels really well to governments optimizing for getting AI deployed quickly, keeping costs down, and maintaining strong administrative control. That's an appealing mix for many. But the EU's model, the rights and risk approach, that will still have global pull, especially where companies really value legal certainty and need access to those premium markets. And yeah, while the U.S. build-first rhetoric and tariff threats might push some partners away, American tech itself, the tools and models, will remain essential in sectors needing that absolute bleeding-edge performance.
So the end result is?
The net result seems to be a truly plural world. You'll likely see many countries doing a kind of mix and match, maybe adopting Chinese standards or systems for specific things like public security tech or managing city services. Then maybe using EU-aligned processes for consumer products or safety-critical sectors, and still relying on U.S. tech for the really heavy-duty frontier AI workloads where performance is everything.
So it's abundantly clear then, the global AI governance landscape is way more intricate than just a simple race or one dominant model taking over. We really are moving into a world with competing templates, countries picking and choosing selectively. It demands a much more nuanced view.
Absolutely. And to really understand how this is going to play out, you need to watch the signals, not just listen to the slogans. For instance, does China start publishing more details about how its algorithm filing and assessment process actually works beyond just listing who filed? More transparency there would make its model much easier for others to copy or adapt.
Good point.
Also, keep an eye on how much traction China's Global AI Governance Action Plan actually gets. Does its language start appearing in bilateral agreements in international bodies like the ITU or ISO, especially in the Global South? That's a key indicator of its real global reach.
And the EU's role, how do we track that?
Well, watch how strictly the EU actually applies those general-purpose AI obligations from its AI Act, starting August 2025. Will Brussels hold firm, or will they give in to calls for delays? That will really show the strength and the actual reach of the Brussels effect moving forward. And finally, what happens with those specific cases, like the bans on DeepSeek in Italy and Taiwan? Do those positions harden over time, or do they soften after the companies try to address the concerns?
How those specific conflicts get resolved.
Exactly. Resolving those tells us a lot about the real points of friction and maybe the potential for compromise in this much more plural AI world.
So as you consider the future of AI, maybe think about how your own country might be navigating these competing visions for governing AI. What could that mix and match approach actually look like? And what would it mean for the technology that's becoming so deeply embedded in our daily lives? Thank you for joining us for this analysis on global AI governance. We hope this exploration has given you a clearer, maybe more nuanced understanding of this really critical topic.